Welcome to the Biopharma Business Intelligence Unit, where symbolic integrity meets strategic clarity. At BBIU, we go beyond the headlines to decode the structural forces behind global biopharma, AI, and economic realignment. If you value precision, verification, and symbolic depth, this channel is for you. Subscribe now to access our weekly briefings, dossiers, and intelligence reports, and consider joining our institutional tier to unlock early warning systems, custom metrics, and exclusive strategic insight. You're not just listening, you're entering the future of epistemic intelligence. www.biopharmabusinessintelligenceunit.com.
CTD Module 1, Generality and the U.S. Regulatory Gateway. SEP 13th, General Background, Why the CTD Exists. Before the CTD, global regulatory submissions were fragmented and inefficient. United States, the FDA required the NDA, New Drug Application format. Europe relied on its own European dossier, structured differently. Japan used the PAL format with unique local requirements. A multinational sponsor developing a drug for the Big Three markets was forced to repackage the same data 3 times, often introducing inconsistencies. The burden was not just economic. It slowed patient access, created misalignment between agencies, and exposed sponsors to errors that could derail approvals. The International Council for Harmonization, ICH, founded in the 1990s, sought to resolve this. The CTD was its most ambitious structural reform, a single global dossier that would be acceptable to the FDA, EMA, and PMDA, and later adopted by dozens of additional agencies worldwide. The CTD's architecture reflects a political compromise. Modules 2 to 5 are fully harmonized, ensuring that quality, non-clinical, and clinical data can be presented identically across jurisdictions. Module 1, however, was deliberately excluded from harmonization. This preserved regulatory sovereignty, allowing each country or region to impose its own administrative, legal, and labeling requirements. Thus, the CTD is more than a technical format. It is a geopolitical artifact balancing global scientific harmonization with national autonomy. What happens when a high pharmacovigilance authority issues an alert or withdrawal? While the CTD structures the entry of data, pharmacovigilance structures its evolution. Here the interplay becomes critical. Trigger event, a serious adverse reaction or a new safety signal detected post-approval. Reported via ICSR's E2B format, aggregated in PSURs, PBRs, or flagged in DSURs if clinical trials are ongoing. High PV country action FDA, EMA, PMDA, Health Canada, or TGA may issue a safety alert, labeling change, suspension, or withdrawal. This action is not automatically binding outside their jurisdiction, but it creates an immediate global ripple. Propagation of the signal shared through UDRA vigilance, intra-EU, bilateral agreements, FDA, EMA, FDA, PDA, etc., and WHO's Vigibase. Other regulators rapidly reassess, returning to the original CTD as their baseline and overlaying the new pharmacovigilance data. Impact on other countries. Many emerging market regulators defer to FDA or EMA decisions. Even without a legal mandate, market access collapses. Sponsors often initiate global voluntary withdrawals to preserve reputational integrity. The analytical loop CTD modules 4 and 5 are revisited. Was this risk visible in animal toxicology? Was it hinted at in clinical subpopulations? Module 1 becomes active again. Labeling is revised, REMS may be added, exclusivity or indications reconsidered. Why Module 1 matters in the context of global safety signals. Administrative gatekeeper blocks deficient dossiers at the start. Legal battleground, patents and exclusivity determine corporate leverage in crisis. Communication anchor, labeling changes are the first global manifestation of a safety alert. Policy mirror, FDA and EMA decisions propagate worldwide, forcing other regulators to re-engage with their own CTD baselines. The logic of the CTD modules. Module 2, Summaries, placed at the front because no reviewer will read 100,000 pages before seeing a coherent narrative. Module 3, Quality and CMC, prioritized because manufacturing integrity is the precondition for any therapeutic claim. Module 4, Non-clinical studies, forming the scientific backdrop of safety. Module 5, Clinical Data, Integrated Analyses of Efficacy and Safety. Module 1, Local Administrative and Legal Content, reminding everyone that harmonization ends at the borders of sovereignty. This order reflects not only information management, but also a regulatory philosophy: narrative, quality, safety, efficacy, local politics. Module 1 in context. Module 1 is where global harmonization stops. Each authority uses it to encode its national interests, administrative forms, fees, and investigator disclosures, labeling, promotional texts, and packaging, patent and exclusivity certifications, risk management and environmental obligations. In the FDA, Module 1 is not a trivial appendix, but the regulatory gateway. Without a compliant Module 1, the agency refuses even to open the scientific sections of the CTD. Structural components of Module 1 in FDA submissions 1. Mandatory forms. At the core of every FDA submission is Form FDA 356H. This single document is the legal gateway into the U.S. drug review system. By signing it, the sponsor certifies that the application is truthful, complete, and that all facilities comply with current good manufacturing practice (CGMP). Without this form, the FDA will not even open the scientific sections of the dossier. No 356H, no review. Beyond this universal form, Module 1 also includes product-specific certifications. A biologic may require declarations about the origin of source materials. A generic ANDA must certify equivalence to a reference drug, and certain antibiotics have legacy forms tied to their regulatory history. These certifications are not symbolic. They are legal statements. If proven false, they expose the sponsor to penalties and potential litigation. Number 2. Labeling and promotional information. The most visible part of Module 1 is the Proposed Prescribing Information, USPI, commonly known as the package insert, PI. This folded leaflet is what physicians, pharmacists, and sometimes patients find inside the box. It dictates approved indications, dosing, contraindications, and warnings. Far from being marketing text, it is a legal and scientific contract. If a company promotes the drug outside the PI, it risks regulatory action and liability. Accompanying the insert are the carton and container labels, which are equally critical. Carton label. This is the outer packaging, the box or blister pack seen on pharmacy shelves. It must present the product name, dosages clearly, avoiding any chance of confusion with other medicines. A poor design can literally cause prescribing or dispensing errors. Container label. This is the immediate packaging that comes into contact with the drug, a vial, bottle, ampoule, or blister unit. Here, the issue is not just legibility, but protection of the product itself. Many drugs are photosensitive, meaning they degrade if exposed to light, requiring amber vials. Others must be shielded from moisture, oxygen, or physical stress during transportation. Biologics, for instance, often require specialized glass containers and strict cold chain conditions. Because packaging directly affects stability and quality, container specifications are tightly linked to Module 3, Quality CMC. Regulators want proof that the chosen packaging maintains the drug's potency and safety from factory to pharmacy to patient. In this sense, cartons and containers are not just wrappers, they are integral safety devices. 3. Administrative and legal information. This section encodes the legal battlefield of pharmaceuticals in the U.S. Patent certifications, Hatch-Waxman framework. Every new drug application must declare whether the product is protected by patents, whether it challenges those patents, or whether no relevant patents exist. These declarations can immediately trigger litigation between innovators and generic manufacturers. Thus, a few sentences in Module 1 may set off lawsuits worth billions. Exclusivity claims. Beyond patents, the FDA grants periods of regulatory exclusivity. A new chemical entity, NCE, can receive 5 years, orphan drugs 7, pediatric studies may add 6 months. These exclusivities are listed in Module 1 and directly determine market dynamics. For many companies, exclusivity is the thin line between blockbuster revenue and generic erosion. Environmental assessments, 21 CFR Part 25, less visible but symbolically significant, the FDA requires companies to assess the environmental impact of their products. For instance, residues of hormonal contraceptives in water systems have ecological consequences. Sponsors must either file an assessment or request a categorical exclusion. Here, Module 1 shows how regulation extends beyond human patients to ecosystems. 4. Regional commitments. Finally, Module 1 encodes commitments specific to U.S. regulatory culture. Financial disclosure by investigators, 21 CFR Part 54. All clinical investigators must disclose whether they hold equity in the sponsor company, proprietary interests in the drug, or have received significant payments. This is not gossip. It ensures that clinical results are interpreted in light of potential conflicts of interest. Pediatric Study Plans, FDA-SIA. Since the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act, sponsors must commit to pediatric evaluations unless formally waived. The logic is simple. Children should not be therapeutic orphans. Module 1 documents these plans and binds the sponsor to follow through. Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategies, REMES. For drugs with serious risks, e.g., teratogenicity, abuse potential, the FDA may require a REMES. This could involve special prescriber certification, patient registries, or restricted distribution. Module 1 is where the proposed REMS is first articulated, becoming a contractual condition of approval. The processual role in FDA review. 1. Pre-submission phase. Before a company even files its application, there is usually a series of pre-submission meetings with the FDA, called pre-IND, pre-NDA, or pre-BLA, depending on the product stage. In these meetings, regulators and the sponsor agree in advance on what Module 1 must contain. For example, if the drug is potentially dangerous in pregnancy, the FDA may indicate early that a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy will be required in the application. If the product is an orphan drug for a rare disease, the sponsor will discuss how to claim exclusivity in the dossier. In other words, this phase is the moment to align expectations. What is omitted here may later become a fatal problem. Number 2. Electronic submission via ESG. All applications to the FDA today must be submitted electronically through the Electronic Submissions Gateway, ESG. The mandatory format is the eCTD, Electronic Common Technical Document. This system is not a simple email upload, it is an automated validation platform. If the file is not in the correct format, with its modules properly structured 1 to 5, the application does not even pass the digital gate. It is like airport security. If a passport is missing or a document is misloaded, boarding the plane is not permitted. 3. Filing review, day to 60. Once the application enters the system, the FDA has 60 days to decide whether to accept or reject the filing. This process is called the filing review. The focus is on Module 1. Are all the forms signed? Are the labels legible? Is the pediatric plan included? Are the patent certifications complete? If key information is missing or there are major errors, the FDA issues a refuse to file (RTF) letter. Example: if Form FDA 356H is incomplete, even if the clinical data in Module 5 is flawless, the application stops immediately. It is like submitting a doctoral thesis with all experiments complete, but without a title page or signature. No one will open it. 4. Substantive review, up to 10 months. If the application passes the filing review, it enters the substantive review phase. This is where the scientific data in Modules 2-5 are evaluated. However, Module 1 does not recede into the background. Labeling negotiations. The FDA often discusses every word of the package insert, PI, with the sponsor. Changing a phrase like may cause dizziness to causes dizziness has legal and medical implications. Exclusivity determinations. If the product claims 5 years of exclusivity as a new chemical entity, NCE, the FDA validates these rights here. This can determine whether there will be generic competition in just a few years or not. REMS planning. If the drug poses special risks, e.g., teratogenicity, abuse potential, the REMS proposed in Module 1 is negotiated and adjusted until approved. This process can last up to 10 months, standard or less under priority review. Throughout the entire period, Module 1 acts as the administrative and legal backbone upon which the final decision is built. Educational implication understanding Module 1 is not about memorizing forms or templates. It is about recognizing how sovereignty, law, and safety converge. No amount of clinical data in Modules 2 to 5 can bypass a deficient Module 1. For professionals entering regulatory affairs, this carries 2 essential lessons. Drug approval is not purely scientific. Even the most robust clinical evidence is filtered through legal obligations, intellectual property certifications, exclusivity claims, environmental statements, and labeling rules. Regulatory approval in the U.S. is therefore never a neutral act of science. It is framed by law, politics, and communication strategies. The CTD is a living dossier. Approval is not the endpoint. Post-marketing pharmacovigilance can trigger new safety signals, forcing authorities to reopen the file, re-examine commitments, revise labeling, or impose new obligations. Module 1 reasserts its gatekeeping role every time the dossier is revisited. whether to add a black box warning, to impose a REMS program, or to reassess exclusivity in light of new competition. What happens if a grave error occurs in Module 1? Imagine a sponsor submits an NDA with impeccable Phase 3 clinical data, Module 5 showing clear efficacy and safety. However, in Module 1, the Form FDA 356H is incomplete. The responsible official failed to sign the section certifying compliance with CGMP. The financial disclosure of investigators is missing, leaving uncertainty about whether key trial results were influenced by conflicts of interest. The patent certification under Hatch-Waxman is inaccurate, failing to list an active patent. In any of these cases, the FDA may issue a refuse to file RTF letter within the first 60 days. The application is returned to the sponsor without review, despite hundreds of millions invested in clinical trials. This is not hypothetical. In 2016, several biosimilar applications were refused for filing not because of weak clinical data, but due to administrative deficiencies in Module 1, missing certifications, and inadequate labeling materials. One well-documented case was Sandoz's biosimilar etanercept, Enbrel, application, where the FDA initially refused to file due to deficiencies in the submission package. The delay allowed Amgen to preserve its market dominance for longer, costing Sandoz significant opportunity in the U.S. market. The consequence was a delay of 6 to 12 months, costing the sponsor both time and market opportunity, while competitors advanced. Historical examples. For instance, in 2010, the FDA issued an RTF letter to AstraZeneca for its blood thinner ticagrelor Brilinta due to incomplete clinical datasets and administrative deficiencies, delaying the U.S. launch by almost a year while the drug was already approved in Europe. In 2015, Amgen faced an RTF for a biosimilar of Avastin, where the issue was not clinical efficacy but missing elements in the submission package, highlighting how administrative precision can stall billion-dollar assets. If the sponsor is publicly traded, when the applicant is a listed company, the impact multiplies. An RTF letter is considered a material event and must be disclosed to investors. Share prices often drop immediately, reflecting lost revenue expectations and reduced investor confidence. Competitors may gain advantage in the market narrative. Company A cannot even get past FDA's filing gate. Investor lawsuits, securities litigation, can follow if management failed to disclose risks related to regulatory readiness. For example, when FDA refused to file certain NDAs in the past due to administrative deficiencies, some companies lost double-digit market capitalization in a single day. Investors interpret an RTF not just as a bureaucratic error, but as a sign of weak internal governance and inadequate regulatory discipline. A notable case was Epix Pharmaceuticals in 2007. When the FDA issued an RTF for its NDA on the imaging agent Vasovist, the company's stock plunged by more than 40% in one trading day. The scientific data remained intact, but the market punished the firm for failing at the administrative gateway. Lesson: Module 1 demonstrates that regulatory science is inseparable from regulatory politics and from market trust. A missing signature or flawed certification can erase billions in valuation overnight. Mastery of Module 1 is therefore not only a regulatory necessity, but a fiduciary duty for any publicly traded sponsor. Conclusion: the CTD is not static. It begins as a harmonized dossier, but becomes a living reference as pharmacovigilance data accumulates. Module 1, though formally unharmonized, is the keystone where administrative law, political sovereignty, and global safety converge. When a high pharmacovigilance authority, like FDA or EMA, issues an alert or withdraws a drug, the CTD is reactivated. The same document that enabled approval now becomes the benchmark for reevaluation. Other countries, using their own Module 1 frameworks, decide whether to mirror the action. In practice, this creates a cascade effect. One regulator's decision, anchored in its Module 1 authority, can reshape access and safety perceptions across the globe. Understanding this dynamic is essential not just for compliance, but for anticipating the structural interplay between harmonized science and sovereign regulation.